Okay. Hi, Stephanie. How are you? Nice to have you on the show.
I'm doing well. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So I know you got a book out, and your book is called The Saint and the Drunk, A Guide to Making the Big Decisions in Your Life. Um, Before we get into that, because this sounds like a big topic that's going to take a lot longer than 15 minutes, but we'll get to the basics of it. I wanted to ask you something I saw on the top here. It says that you are a board certified executive coach and writer. And then it says her storytelling on The Moth has been featured on NPR. What is The Moth?
The Moth is an organization that supports storytelling, so true stories that are told by just regular people. And they have a show on NPR. They do story slams, the Moth main stage. And I had an interesting experience where I got a call a number of years ago and from somebody at the Moth that said, "We heard the story of how your son died, and we want you to stand up on a stage and tell it to 1,000 people." And I said, "Absolutely not." But they felt like it was an important story. I was a single mother. My son was in a car accident and suffered a debilitating traumatic brain injury. And I had to fight with my insurance company to get him the care he needed. And he died about a year and a half after his accident. And they really felt like it was important for me to stand up and tell the story of a single mom fighting with an insurance company for covered benefits for her son. And I worked with Catherine Burns, who was the executive director at the time. And it was the first time I had told that story in a public venue. I actually told it on the Moth main stage in San Francisco, and then again in Seattle, where I live. And I had been a fiction writer my whole life, but telling a true story and seeing how people responded to me when it was aired on NPR, I had people reach out to me on social media and send me pictures of their dead children because they wanted to honor their kids and they wanted to talk to another bereaved parent. And I realized there was a real power in a true story. And so, about that time, I decided to move from just writing fiction to writing nonfiction. I started a Substack. It's called the Consigliere Papers. I've been doing that for about 2.5 years. And then I decided to write this book.
Well, first, I'm sorry to hear about your son. Was his death in any way related to the insurance company not paying the claim? I mean, in other
No,
words, had paid it, would he have survived or lived longer or?
it's possible. The insurance company, which was United Healthcare, and this was 20 years ago, and there was a challenge in getting him into the appropriate rehabilitation program. When someone has a traumatic brain injury or TBI, it's very important to get into rehab as quickly as possible, and that was delayed by about a year. And so that didn't help, but ultimately, he died of medical malpractice. He was in a nursing home and they made a mistake in his care. So I don't know that that would have made a difference. The insurance company didn't cover long term nursing care. So I was able to put my son into a nursing home after he turned 18 because he was on Medicaid. So, yeah, I don't know that it would have made a difference.
One of the things that I'm always interested in, you said on here, board certified executive coach. Are you coaching executives or are you an executive coach? I always get confused which way that goes.
I was an executive. I worked in advertising and technology for many years, sometimes at an executive level, but I coach primarily executives. I have been an executive coach for about 10 years. I primarily coach people in the C suite and senior managers who work in creative industries, so a lot of advertising agencies. And I am now moving into working also with additional individuals. So people who are in a kind of career transition So I will, I guess, become a coach as well as just an executive coach. But I'm primarily working with people who are working in the corporate world in leadership.
Okay. Does this book have anything to do with that?
It started from that. So I have a way of making decisions that is based on an ancient spiritual practice called discernment, which is basically a way of making decisions that moves us beyond just the intellectual pros and cons into a way of focusing on the wisdom, what I call the genius of the body, our imagination, our values and intentions. And it's something that I've done for, gosh, 30 years. And that is how I make decisions. And when I would have clients come to me and ask me for guidance in making a specific career decision, I was diffident to talk to them about discernment because it is an explicitly Catholic, Christian, biblical based practice. And most of my clients are atheist, agnostic, or we just don't talk about spirituality. These are CEOs, right? But they were really hungry for it. And so I realized that I could take the idea of discernment, and that's the saint is St. Ignatius of Loyola, who started the Jesuit order. He was a medieval saint, and he came up with the spiritual practice of discernment to make decisions. And I thought, if I could figure out a different sort of philosophical frame to make it more accessible, that would be useful. And I realized in 12-step spirituality, there is a concept of the higher power, and that's the drunk. So Bill Wilson, who was the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, started AA as a pretty explicitly Christian organization. And early recovering alcoholics who were atheists and agnostics came to him and said, "Where's space for us? We don't believe in your God." And so Bill Wilson wrote about the higher power, which is you can have a spiritual practice that will help you not die of alcoholism. Just pick a higher power. We don't care. It can be nature, it can be your ancestors, it can be your deepest self. And I thought, you know what? Those two together might be helpful. And so using that as kind of a foundation, I brought to my clients a process of making decisions that was grounded in those ancient and older frames. And then I built on it over a course of a couple of years. And then some young friends said to me, "You should put this in a book." Both of these women that I was talking to were in their early 20s. They were both artists who had day jobs. And they were explaining to me as I took them through this content that they were really hungry for a new ethos of work. They had been through the pandemic. They told me I don't want to work like my older siblings. I don't want to work like my parents. I want to balance other things in my life than how I get a paycheck. And they felt like this would be useful. So I said, okay, I'll put it in a book.
The big decisions in your life, are we talking about career, personal relationships, all of the above?
All of the above. I felt like it would be easiest to focus specifically on decisions about what you are called to do in the world, which for a lot of people is their career. But for other people, it is art. For some people, it might be parenting or caregiving. It's that connecting to that authentic, innate desire to be in the world in a particular way, right? To do the thing that makes you come most fully alive. And I feel that a lot of people lose the connection to that sort of inner guidance, right? A lot of times people use the word vocation to talk about an affiliation with a religious order, like, do you have a vocation to become a priest or any kind of vowed religious life? But I like the idea of a vocation. People can have a vocation to be a parent or a teacher or a writer. And so it's really trying to give people access to an inner compass that combines not just the intellectual pros and cons, but gives them tools to tap into the wisdom of the body, their dreams and longings, while still staying grounded in a practical reality of the fact that we have to have jobs, and we need to support our families.
Okay, well, that's where I was going to go with this, and we have about 3.5 minutes, so I don't think we're going to get too deep. But I think a lot of artists, myself included, know what they want to be doing, know what their passion is. But a lot of us have had to do other things to pay the rent. So how do you, in other words, how do you justify that in your head? You say, well, I know I want to be a musician. I know that's where my passion lies, but I can't afford to eat if I stay with that. So I'm going to have to go do something else.
I think what's important is understanding where your North Star is. If you are called to be an artist and that is what brings you your sense of authentic connection, you should do that while still staying grounded in the reality, and do both, right? This, one of my young friends uses the phrase work and econ. Econ is the job that she does. Work is her art. And it just allows you to focus. Of course, we need to have our day jobs. I have a day job, but understanding that my day job needs to be structured in a way that allows me to have time to do my art can be a really useful way to orient yourself if you're an artist. And that's something that I cover quite deeply in the book.
Okay, so it's possible to do both.
It's possible. It's not only possible, it's important.
It's important to
Right?
do both. Okay.
Yeah, if you know what it is that feeds your soul, you need to carve out time to do that, even if it's only a few hours a week.
Okay, good. Good advice. Has the book been released?
It is going to be released at the end of May, but it is available for pre-order in both the US and the UK. My publisher is based in London.
Okay. Well, Stephanie, we got to wrap this up. The last thing is, do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It is speirolo.com, which is my last name. So SPEIROLO.com. And you can also search for me at Peirolo on most social media sites.
All right, great. Well, again, thank you for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, chatting with you. This was a big topic, which we could have been here for hours on this one. But I think we gave people an overview of your book. And we look forward to it being released. You said the end of May?
The end of May, yes.
Okay.
But it is available for pre-order now.
Pre-order now. All right, very good. Well, best of luck with the book.
Thank you very much, Douglas.